I'm Dane Rose, and in this video I want to explore some of the paradigms that I find useful around the psychedelic experience. And to do that, I want to begin by looking at the self in relationship to the larger ecology. And so one of the most important things to understand about reality is its fractal nature. And fractal science is the discovery that in large areas of nature and ecology, patterns repeat essentially the same on an endless continuum of scale. And so in that scenario, you'll see the planets as the proton and the electron rotate around one another. As if you look at the composition of the atom, you see this constellation of a solar system with things revolving around. And when we step up to then the planetary level, we see the same pattern, objects rotating around one another. Within the fractal nature of human consciousness, we have the culture. And step down a little bit, you have the government. And step down a little bit, you have the family system. And step down a little bit, you have the ego lens. And one of the best ways to look at the ego or sense of self is as a zoom-in lens, that we exist inside of a larger ecological synergy, but that when we zoom in and pay attention to a small portion of that synergy that we call us, we have this illusion of separation. We have this sense that this is me and that's not me. This is me, that's not me. And so we have a little circle inside of a larger circle that we define as self. Now within the paradigm of the larger body, we could see that we are a cell. We are the equivalent of one of our cells inside of our own body. And when we think of the cells in our own body and our relationship with those cells, we think in terms of the health and vitality of the whole body. And within the paradigm of synergy, in order for the whole body to be optimally healthy, each individual cell must be optimally healthy. And so within ecological consciousness, there's really no difference between the larger self and the individual self in terms of when we think about what we want for the well-being of our body. We are including in that the well-being of every cell inside of our body, so that because to a certain extent, the phenomena of synergy is such that by being a part of something bigger than ourselves, we experience a synergy that we cannot get with any one cell. Let alone the problem of could a cell survive completely independent from the larger body? Could we survive without depending on the larger ecology of which we are a part? Could we survive without oxygen? You see, that's a dependent relationship. Drinking is a dependent relationship. We're taking stuff in and we're breathing stuff out. Breath, the breath of liquid, the breath of substance, the breath of oxygen. Bringing something in and leaving something out. And one could say that a lot of our crisis, a lot of our problems, come in the application of the influence of our freedom, the influence of our free will, around what we choose to take in and what we choose to put out and what we choose to hold on to. Because within this paradigm, whether it is on a mental dimension, an emotional dimension, an energetic dimension, or a physical dimension, the essence of human freedom is the choice of what we take in, how we combine what we take in to generate something new, something creative, something synergistic, and what we release from our heart, mind, and body, and what's the duration. We could look at the human ego as a pot, and depending on what our values are and our focuses are and our outer context and situation is, we're putting certain things into the pot, and we're mixing them in a certain way, and we're producing a certain kind of alchemy, and then we're letting that alchemy out, or perhaps letting that alchemy kill us. If we hold on to a toxic alchemy, if we create a toxic alchemy and hold on to that toxic alchemy, we are dying, we are consuming ourselves, and we can end our own existence, just like a cell in the body can take on the toxicity of the larger body and either digest it or release it or hold on to it and be dissolved and removed from the larger body. So we are, in a sense, the lens as an ego that is monitoring the stream of energy in a larger ecology of which we are a part, and are participating in the alchemy that occurs within that stream of energy on the different dimensions, mental, emotional, energetic, and physical, of which we are a part. And we can make as many dimensions as we want through the distinction of language. We can talk about a financial dimension, an emotional dimension, a sensitivity continuum. We can create as many dimensions as we want by refracting light into as many colors as we want. A computer creates 256 million different colors. We have a hard time remembering more than about 30. And so it's really the limitations of the processing power of human consciousness to remember and put together a complex system. Reality will be as complex or as simple as we need it to be. Now, within the paradigm of polarity, which we express in a variety of ways, up and down, good and bad, yin and yang, masculine and feminine, within the paradigm of polarity, one of the important polarities that we play with as a species is masculine and feminine energy, yin and yang. And this ties into the emphasis of culture and the emphasis subsequently on us as human egos. And if you think of polarity in the dynamic of movement, life is the process of energy moving through. Life is the process of flow, of rhythm, of breath. Death is the phenomena of fixation, of crystallization without relief. The more crystallized, still, stuck, and stagnant we are, the closer we are to death. And so in that sense, to open up life, it's about letting something flow through in a way that has integrity, in a way that integrates the various parts of who we are, heart, mind, and body being central to the human experience. And if you think of movement in a very complex system, it's spherical. If you think of the most graceful shape, which is the shape that takes the least amount of energy to transform from one location to another, to transport from one location to another. If we think of the most graceful shape, we're looking at the most elegant shape in the scientific sense, which is minimum effort for maximum result. And we have the sphere or the wheel. The sphere can go in any direction with minimal effort. A square is quite hard to turn, which is why we don't have square wheels on our cars. It's a very, very bumpy ride. And the circle is this wonderful synergy and paradox, because it is simultaneously the ultimate masculine expression and the ultimate feminine expression. It is an ultimate expression of an infinite refraction of lines, an infinite number of lines. So if you think of how do you make a sphere, you either have just this one perfect shape, this oneness, which is the feminine expression of the sphere, or you take a few billion lines and you create a few billion distinct angles, and you create it around the circle, around the sphere. And what you have is symmetry in the middle. You have the space that is between an infinite number of lines. In symmetry becomes the sphere. You just keep drawing lines, and what you get in the circle, in the middle, is a circle, is a sphere. And so the sphere is one of the most fundamental shapes within the mathematics and within the outer expression of reality, because it is that synergy of masculine and feminine energy. And there are a couple of different expressions in this polarity of masculine and feminine energy. And one of those expressions is, different things like the inner world, the more subjective world, more feminine, the outer world, more masculine. Within the inner world, thought, structure, more masculine, emotion, more feminine. So even within the inner world, remember these things are intricately connected in the oneness of the synergy of both masculine and feminine expression. But within the phenomena of flow, as human beings, we have this bipedal movement. And what bipedal movement basically looks like is we put our weight on one side, on the right side, on the left side, on the masculine side or the feminine side. And we lean hard. We lean towards the future. And while we're leaning hard, while we're falling forward, we lift up the other foot and we place it down. And then we lean hard on that and we lift up the other foot. And we're like a ball rolling forward, where we just keep taking the left and the right side and placing it in front, putting all of our weight there as to give room to lift up and put our weight there. If we don't continue this rotation, we fall down. We lean in, and if we don't place the opposite foot, we fall flat in our face. And so, at the very least, we hop. But the ultimate symmetry, the ultimate grace, the ultimate synergy of our potential is released by the sharing of position between these two extremes, masculine and feminine. And in the history of the species, in the history of the planet, there have been times and cultures that were incredibly matriarchal, where the focus was more on community. Even in our cultures around the planet today, there are certain countries that are more leaning towards feminine energy. For example, Thailand is one of the countries that I go to for balance of the extreme masculine emphasis in the United States. And on a number of cultural continuums, you have the respect for the elder. You have the respect for the elder, and then you have the honor of the young or the honor of the new. The respect for tradition, the aspiration to be modern, to be different. You have the focus on the point, the individual, and you have the focus on the family, on the circle. You have the focus on efficiency and accomplishment, and you have the focus on smiling and presence. So there's a number of areas where the United States is the masculine pole and Thailand is the feminine pole on a variety of cultural continuums. And we tend to, if you think of the experience of the human ego and the human body, so much of the question of health and vitality is one of balance. Too little salt and you die, too much salt and you die. Too little money and you die, too much money, you can die. Too little water and you die, too much water and you die. And there's this mix in the middle. There's this point in the middle where that is alive and healthy. Too much masculine energy and you die, too much feminine energy and you die. In a conversation, if both people listen and no one speaks, there's no communication. If both people speak and no one listens, there's no communication. The sweet spot is in this alternating dance between speaking and listening, speaking and listening. That's where you have the symmetry called communication. Similarly with giving, if no one receives the gift, you cannot give a gift. If no one gives a gift, you cannot receive a gift. For energy to be exchanged, there must be a giver and there must be a receiver. The giver occupying the masculine pole, the receiver occupying the feminine pole. The culture overlaying an essentially neutral phenomena, meaning a scientist that is evaluating the components in communication cannot say that someone who speaks is more important than someone who listens, because they're both integral. There is no communication without either one. A scientist evaluating electrical flow cannot say that the plug is or is not more valuable than the outlet. If there's no plug, there's no electricity. If there's no outlet, there's no electricity. The flow happens when the masculine and the feminine are paired and release the polarity in a way that creates flow. Now, similarly, if you think of the human ego as this zoom-in lens that's kind of measuring this little circular domain called me, called I, and you look at the fact that we exist in a river, we exist in a stream in which oxygen is coming in and oxygen is, or carbon dioxide is going out, in which food is coming in and fertilizer is going out, in which liquid is coming in and fertilizer is going out. Fertilizer that nourishes what is food, in the same way that our carbon dioxide feeds trees and our trees feed us. There is a circle. There is a circle. If the trees feed us and we don't feed the trees, there is death. The circle breaks down. And so we are in a flow point, and on an energy system level, one of the flow points is the grounding connection with the earth and the grounding connection with all possibility. And if we don't have both points, if we have endless possibility with no grounding, or endless grounding and no possibility, energy doesn't flow. Both polarities exist in an equal scientific partnership to create the mathematical phenomena of optimal symmetry, of optimal synergy. So, with this framework in mind, we can see that our culture has been leaning very, very hard to the masculine for the last number of thousands of years. That we're leaning on the outer, we're leaning on the image, we're leaning on the symbol, we're leaning on the individual rather than the circle. We're leaning on men, and we're just beginning to pivot some of the world towards women. We're leaning on hierarchical ranking systems rather than inclusive systems. And we're leaning on technology, outer technology rather than inner technology. And this can easily be added up. If you look at how many trillions of dollars are spent a year on outer development and outer technology versus inner development and inner technology, you will see the gap in the cult's emphasis. Now, just as there's a tension between the ego and the larger self, there is a tension between nature as a representation of reality and culture, the cult of which we belong, the cult that creates the memes of thoughts and of behavior and of feeling. The culture, which is a lagging heuristic map of nature. And to give a sense of this, you can see the infinite circle, which is both the oneness and the infinite refraction of lines, is represented in the mathematics of nature, in the mathematics of reality. So we have the infinite represented in the mathematics of reality. But we can't deal with 399,280,560,289,102 and 0.6. That doesn't have any meaning within human consciousness. It's too complex for us to grasp in a visceral and meaningful way. And so it's not real to us. It's real to nature. That's a very small number. That's a very small number. There could be more universes than that number. More planets and stars in every universe than that number. More atoms in a single body than that number. But it's too big of a number for this little sense of an ego zoomed in lens to grasp in a meaningful way. And so what we do is we refract the infinite sphere into a heuristic map of reality. Nice 5-pointed stars. Can you remember 5 things? Can you organize your life to a 5-pointed star rather than an infinite an infinite sphere. Could you say, or is it too much? Do we have work and then we have life? Is it a two, is it a bipolar system? Or could we have it be spirituality, romance, personal development, money goals, helping the community goals? How could we develop a model of reality that is a little bit more complex than work and life balance? And what would that be? And this is where culture comes in. And so culture is not reality. Culture is a dumbed down lag version of aspects of reality. And we can see in this kind of shift from masculine to feminine energy, one of the reasons why our cults of today are still emphasizing masculine energy. Why the Olympics is still a big deal. And if you look at the last few thousand years, perhaps the last 12,000 years of the species, we have things like the population of the Americas from the Europeans, and we are a European culture. And there was a time in the last 12,000 years where a lot of people thought the earth was flat. There was a time in the last 12,000 years where a lot of people thought we were the center of the universe, and people were killed for saying anything different. And sailing off from Spain or from France or England towards the United States or towards the Indies, that's the word Indian, it's a big deal. And when you're at sea with 30-foot waves in a storm, the fact that the male body is 10, 20, 30% more competent at certain focusing tasks, at certain areas of strength, at certain types of sociopathic thinking, of ignoring everything else and focusing on a single point. We've got to get there, and nothing else matters, that focus on the point. There is a place, because who in their right mind, sitting around a circle, enjoying cups of tea, having nice relationships, who in their right mind would sail halfway around the planet to kill other people and take their land? It's not an enjoyable thing to do. It's not an intelligent thing to do, in the sense it's uncomfortable. It takes this singular focus and push in certain terrains. When some of the migrations were happening, across Siberia and over to Alaska and down into the Americas, etc., who survives? If not the strongest, tallest, biggest, healthiest individual. And if you're in a blizzard with 3 feet of snow and you've got children and you want to survive as a species, and you've got a 6'5" giant amongst you who can carry 2 kids on one shoulder and go out ahead and do battle with polar bears and scout and come back. That individual represents the focus, the promise of the species' survival more than some petite cutie who has a more diffuse focus. The dependency on the species in times of physical crisis, all things being equal and without the technological age, when the focus comes down on the physical body, it leans harder on the male body. If you're on a sports team and you can pick between 100 men and 100 women, and the focus is on physical mass, or like running or javelin throwing, all things being equal, if just they're randomly selected, you're going to pick more men for the team to win. That's a physical reality. And we're coming out of a period in the last 10,000 years where there was very little technology and very great hardship. Mountain climbing, horseback riding, trudging through snow were big deals. That's where a man, if you want your communities to survive, you will elevate the honor to the man. Because the man has a 10, 20, 30, 50% edge in different situations, depending on the specific man, of course. Similarly, in the tribal dynamics of chimpanzees. When these chimpanzee families split and then commit genocide with one another and go head to head, whether your group is decimated or not, in part depends on the alpha male, the size, the health, the confidence of the alpha. And a well-sexed, well-fed, strong and intelligent, confident alpha can determine whether your company, literally in financial circles, whether your community, whether your family, whether your country survives in a battle with difficult physical terrain. And so the cults that are present today, remember, are dumbed down heuristic models of reality that lag. And so we're still in cults which honor the masculine, disproportionate, that lean disproportionately, that overvalue for present-day reality the masculine. 6,000 years ago, you're committing a path of migration and have to confront various unknowns. You want lots of strong, loyal, dedicated men at the front, willing to die to protect the group, the tribe. And what is going to make a male willing to die? Being treated like shit, having everything put to consensus, getting the last bit of meat? No. There has to be a balance. And the balance is one of deference. The balance is one of authority. I'm putting my life on the line to protect the feminine, figuratively and literally. And so there's a natural emphasis on the masculine and on the male. The harsher the physical situations, the less technology there is, because this changes. See, and this is why I say cults lag behind nature and reality. They're a lagging heuristic map. They're not reality. They're a version. They're a dumbed-down version of reality, one. And they're not in the present. They're in the past. So we still worship the Olympics, despite the fact that few of us are ever going to find ourselves, needing to migrate to a new continent, And if we do need to migrate it to a new continent, we'll get on a plane. And that 6 foot, 7 inch tall body with big brawn is going to feel uncomfortable in the economy plane seats, and we'd save money if we were a little bit more small. And see, the drive of the masculine, with all the focus on manufacturing and technology, and all of the sociopathic dissonance that comes from leaning hard on any pole in reality, has created a world in which the masculine is less relevant. Meaning masculine brawn built steel companies, built tanks, built missiles, built swords, planted forests, built factories, drilled for oil. Masculine brawn created the technology in which it is no longer needed. Once you have a tank, a petite 120-pound woman may be better at navigating the tank with diffuse awareness and just the ability to look at screens than someone a 6'5" man. When you have a reduction in ecological strain, 1, and 2, when you have technology that levels the playing field, meaning a pistol will kill you as effectively by a 14-year-old girl as it will a 35-year-old muscle man male. So there's a new reality in which feminine energy and females can propel the species forward more effectively than masculine energy and males, with the primary focuses on the reality today, which are ecological. And ecological awareness is about the relationships between each part of the whole, whereas individual awareness or masculine awareness is about the point. I want this now, and I am going to do whatever it takes to get this now, and screw everything else. Screw the planet. Screw anyone. I don't care. I want this now. The essence of the American ethos is masculine individual self-absorption in the moment. Expediency of the individual. Now, that single-minded focus that brought the species to where it is today is the same focus that will see it falling flat on its face unless, in that dual motion of walking, the position changes. And this is why it is a deep partnership. There is no ultimate objective, better or worse in all contexts. For ecological survival, for tribal and species well-being, for a sense of joyful presence and purpose in life, feminine energy, and females in service to the circle, not in service to the masculine ethos, in service to the circle, provide a higher return of well-being per unit of energy than more masculine energy. And although in individual situations, in objectively, on a scientific level, there is no difference in value between a male and a female, between masculine and feminine energy. In different moments there is. And we're going from a long lagging moment in which we're still worshiping what was getting us through 500 years ago. But men and masculine energy are not providing the amount of benefit to the species that justifies disproportionate honor and power. The world we have created, and you can think of this in particular around information, there is no benefit to having a 6-foot body reading email than a 3-foot body reading email. So the fact that men are statistically taller than women doesn't matter in the information age. It doesn't matter when you're reading a book. The fact that you can punch faster with a male body doesn't matter as much. And it matters less in an information age. In Dubai, you can leave a Lamborghini in the street with a key in it, and no one steals it. So you don't need that extra little bit to rush, and when you confront the thief, you don't need to punch him, etc. Because with the information age comes facial recognition cameras. You'd know exactly who stole the car and where it drove to, so why steal it? So this edge of the larger dominant body is less and less relevant in the environment created by the dominant body, and that's how it should be. As you lean from an age in which you're leaning hard on the masculine, you're leaning forward and you're going to fall flat on your face, you've got to put the feminine out in front and shift the weight for the species to keep running, to keep sprinting towards growth and development, towards symmetry and towards grace. Now, the good news is that for the most part, there's no there's no downside for a 6-foot tall person to read email. There's no downside for a 6-foot tall person with big muscles to read a book. There's no downside for a 6-foot person to be in an autonomous car. The car has to be a little bit bigger, but that's more spacious for everyone else. So there's not a big problem. So the real shift is from masculine domination focus to feminine focus. And this is one of the reasons that psychedelics are so feared and so important as a consequence, as an impact. Now we have the circle, and we can organize the circle in a masculine and centralized way, which is the way governments, in a masculine expression of power, are currently organized. And so all information, the Central Intelligence Agency gathers all information and brings it to Langley, brings it to the point. And then they decide who gets to know. Do we get to tell? Do we tell the public what we're doing with their tax dollars? No, let's not do that. We'll bring the information in and we'll hold it there. And then on a need-to-know basis, we'll tell this person this bit. But we're controlling everything. So we've got all these spokes coming in, all these reports. And we've got the nice guy, right? The masculine expression of the masculine consciousness. the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. All this stuff comes in, and then we'll tell you this bit, and we'll tell you that bit, and we'll let little bits of it out to little people for what? Our own agenda, you see, the centralized power control mechanism. And so you have the spokes of the wheel type dynamic. And this is no accident. This is exactly what's going on inside the masculine, trained, cultured ego of each one in Western consciousness. The hand tells us information about this. Okay, we took note of that. The this does this. Well, took this. Well, this. So-and-so told this. We'll tell this person, but not this person. The ego is the central intelligence gathering portion within the world and within the psyche. This is happening, that's happening. I'm going to say this, but I'm not going to say this. I'm going to hear all this stuff, but I'm going to tell you what so-and-so said, and I'm not going to tell you. And I'm going to tell you what this person said, and I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to control what comes in and what goes out in this very parsimonious way. And the ego is much more sophisticated even than that in its biological organization. What's called the default mode network in the brain gathers all sensory data, but it only reports less than 50% of it to consciousness. It says, oh, that didn't matter. You know, like right now I'm making this video, and my default mode network says, those little birds singing in the background, what birds? I didn't even notice them. Oh, there's birds. Yeah, but that doesn't matter. What does it have to do with looking good on camera? So you've got to focus on that. That's what matters. This other stuff, this peripheral information, which is the domain of the feminine, that doesn't matter. What matters is this now. Did we get the audio quality? Did we do this? Did we do this? That's all that matters, and everything else doesn't. And so that's masculine consciousness at work. That's getting to the point. And this whole conversation is not very masculine, is it? All this contextual information, human beings, what does that have to do with what I want now? Get to the point. Well, that's masculine. That's the masculine dominance in communication. Get to the point. What's your point? That's all I want to know. I don't want to know the journey. I don't want to know the circle. I don't want to know the periphery. I just want the straight line, the fastest straight line to here to there. Do it, and then I'm done with you. I've used you for your purpose. You've helped me get from point A to point B. Now I'm done with you, and I'm going to move on to other things. So it's singular thinking. But this is our government, and it's about control and ego and centralized power. And that government exists inside each one of our brains, called the default mode network. And what the default mode network does is it ensures that we do not know a great deal of what's going on, because it's filtered out. It's filtered out. And many people thought that what psychedelics did was they lit up the brain. That, they activated areas of the brain that were not normally activated, and that this was the purpose of psychedelics. But that's not actually what's going on at all. The only thing that, for example, psilocybin does, and they looked at this at Johns Hopkins, psilocybin decreases blood and energy flow to the default mode network. So this is the equivalent of starving Langley or the government of information for a while, cutting them out, taking off the hub. Now, we are in an interconnected fractal reality. Health and vitality is relationship. And so what happens is that the default mode network has been suppressing information about senses, about how exciting the body feels like. The default node network has been suppressing fascination and wonder at the intensity of color. It's been saying, no, that's not important. That's not going to keep you alive. Focus, focus, stay on the road. So the default mode, you have to get from point A to point B as fast and safely as possible. And so that's the default mode's job, is to filter out and reject and leave in the domain of the unconscious vast regions of possibility and probability, to focus on the cult, to focus on those few things that the cult has elevated, namely in our cult's masculine energy. Be a better speaker. You don't go to Toastmasters to learn the feminine role of listening. Now, the fact that we would all like to be listened to a lot more, and we wouldn't like to be talked to as much, but we'd like to be listened to more, would suggest that the obvious thing would be to have a listen masters rather than Toastmasters, and then everyone would go out and learn how to be great listeners, and we'd all have this wonderful experience of being heard. But in a masculine cult, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't occur to a cult that speaking is irrelevant without listening, that speakers are irrelevant without listeners. And if we've got too few listeners, becoming a better speaker, a better public speaker or otherwise, doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. You'll prepare your beautiful speech and no one will let it in, because no one's learned the grace and the art of feminine presence, men or women, because it wasn't valued within the cult's ranking system. And this is where our cult is well behind the curve, as all cults are. They're not reality, they're lagging versions of reality. So when the default mode network in the human ego is knocked down for a period of a couple of hours because blood and oxygen are starved, that's all psilocybin does, is it takes the ego and reduces it. And it says, you're not going to get all the power and the food for a little while. And then what happens is, without that fear and control matrix in place, is a geometric explosion of information occurs where different parts of the brain don't have their signal bottled down. It's kind of like being in jail. Being in masculine centralized consciousness is like being in jail. Mom sends you a letter. The prison guard opens the letter and says, we don't like that idea going through to our prisoners, so we're just going to tear up this letter. You send a letter to your hero, and the prisoner, the warden opens the letter and says, what does a famous person who's out making lots of money for our culture need to hear from a prisoner? Let's not pass that on, or we're going to redact this, and you can't say this, and you can't say this. And so there's a filtering blockade within the egoic consciousness that's saying, you over here don't need to know this, and you don't need to know this, and you don't need to know this. And so we feel isolated, we feel numb, we feel dissociated, we feel depressed, we feel tired, we feel bound up and stuck, because energy isn't allowed to flow. And while the blood and oxygen is being starved out of the default mode network of the human ego of masculine cult referencing consciousness, we then have a feminine connected flow of decentralized partnering and relating unleashed, because it's not being dominated. And part of the problem that comes with egoic identity is we are in fact part of a larger body. The mathematics of the species is clear. We receive the optimum benefit. We become the most intelligent in sophisticated, empathic synergies of partnership. Meaning it takes less and less energy to create more and more human well-being. The more people there are in synergistic, empathic, harmonious relationship. You can think of insurance, for example, as just a very small thing. In any year, one person's going to get in a car accident and gonna have a $200,000 medical bill. We don't know who it's gonna be. Well, if we can all pay $200 and there's 1,000 of us, we can all pay $200. And then, oh, this year it's you. Here's your 200,000. Get well and come back to the circle. But if we don't collaborate in that way with insurance, as just one example, then no one can pay the $200,000 bill when it shows up, and they can't work at that time, and then we lose a valuable member of the community. And so you have this phenomena where, again, if you've ever cooked for one person and then cooked for 50 people, it doesn't take 50 times more energy to create a huge pot of soup for 50 people than it does to take one. You start off with hot water, you can have a pot of soup for 50 people in the same hour it would take to get a pot of soup for one person. Because there are synergies of scale. Now, you can't just have synergies of scale, meaning if you have thousands of people all trying to kill each other, you don't have synergies of scale. You have exponential greater risk, but you don't have well-being. In order for you to release the synergy of optimal mathematics, meaning the point of that is most intelligent, you can measure the intelligence of a group by how much energy it takes in that group to create a unit of human well-being. To release optimal intelligence, you need a combination of large numbers of people, the more the better, relative to the ecology, of course, but anything over 1 billion is plenty. You need large numbers of people who are empathic, not sociopathic, who are competent, who have unique specialized skills, and who are partnering with empathy to release the synergies capable in the species. This is the direction of optimal intelligence. And it's similar within the human brain. You have large sections of the psyche, all these different sensory datas. When the psyche relates empathically with all the other parts of the psyche, when each part of the brain communicates empathically, synergistically with the rest of the brain, the highest potential of the individual is released. But the default mode network has a job not of releasing the optimal potential of the individual, but of maintaining control, which means maintaining the status quo, which means protecting against innovation and change that is the terrifying unknown, that is the bane, that is the nemesis of every traumatized culture. Every traumatized culture, a culture that induces fear of death and doesn't heal the fear of death and has elements of sociopathic betrayal, is a traumatized culture. In a traumatized culture, every trauma in history has always come out of the unknown. It's come out of the unknown, and it's been threatening. The unknown has threatened the culture, the tribe. And so the culture protects the individuals by maintaining a status quo. However insane, this is how we do things here. In our cult, we say, "How are you?" Now, we don't mean, "How are you doing?" That's the last thing we want to know, but we say, "How are you?" And then we say, "We're fine." Why do we do that? When we have 2 seconds, why do when you're walking by someone and you don't even have time to listen to, I'm fine, why do you say, hey, how are you, and walk on? Why do you do that? Well, you see, that's what we do to feel safe. Because that's what we do in this cult. We pretend this and this and this, and we all do it, and so we all feel familiar. You see, and it helps our bodies calm down because we're all mostly still alive. And so if we're all doing whatever we all do, whatever it is, however dumb and irrational, but we're most of us alive, we can tell ourselves if we do what other people do, most of us will probably be alive too. Let's just copy what other people are doing. And so you have the default modes network is a lot about filtering out novelty and difference. Difference comes in, it's like, oh dear, that's not going to make people feel comfortable. No, that's a change. That's a change. That's no good. Let's get rid of that idea. Let's take that individual who has a unique idea and get rid of them. It will make the cult uncomfortable. It will change the default mode. The status quo would have to evolve. They're bringing data to light that requires change, and we don't like it. We don't want it. We don't like it. Get it out of here. And so it's cut. You know, in a centralized power system, the dissidents are starved. They're fed to the gulag. They're fed to the concentration camp. The dissidents are starved of energy. And those that validate the status quo, that say that's the way it's been and that's the way it's going to be and that's the way it was before and that's good because we don't like any change around here, that masculine control dynamic, it just cuts off innovation. And what happens is one of two things. The cult will die, as most cults have, or it will evolve. Because the cult that, you see, the cult of masculine dominance and chauvinism at one time in some versions helped the species survive. Now it's killing the species. But the cults are self-referential. That's what cults are. They're not wanting to change with the environment. Out of terror and out of trauma, we evolved a cult that said this is the way things are and need to be for us to live. And then we fell asleep and said we're just going to keep doing what kept us alive before. And yet that which kept us alive before will kill us tomorrow. The first bite of chocolate cake is exquisite. The second bite, filling. The 500,000th bite of chocolate cake will kill you if you can get it into your mouth. When you have extremes, and we're such a small self in such a large ecology, extremes will kill us. We have to lean into an extreme, and then right at the point where it's oversaturating us, we've got to pivot to something else. So you have feminine, connected, flow, decentralized, and power. And what's interesting is you have a tremendous amount of efficiency. You see, this point here in a decentralized power system, it has a relationship with this point, with this point, with this point, with this point, and the circle. Now this would be a representative of a feminine relationship between 5 people, or a feminine relationship with 5 points within the self. So we have person 1, person 2, person 3, person 4, person 5. In a healthy, robust ecology that is sustainable, the optimum mathematics are independent relationships with every person in the circle. If someone wants to maintain control, they've got to destabilize and cut and keep apart. You can have one person terrorizing, like, in a dictatorship. You have one person terrorizing an entire country because they're keeping the interconnected relationships severed. You know, Hitler indoctrinated the Hitler Youth so that the youth would betray their own parents to the Nazis. In doing so, we concentrated power on Hitler. Concentrated power is the expression of masculine energy. And it's not all negative. The great kings, the great queens that serve their people have been beautiful expressions. You know, the recent Thai king, beloved by Thai people, the king of Bhutan, who by decree ordered democracy against the will of his own people for the benefit of the people. The most potent role for the masculine is to take all of that concentrated power in service of the most vulnerable people in the circle. The ones, you see, because if you think of a wheel and you want to travel 10,000 miles on this wheel, and there's a lot of spokes in the wheel, but right over here, this whole 20% section of the wheel is incredibly fragile. And you've got centralized control of resources. So what do? Do you strengthen the spokes over here that are very strong? Or do you come over here and strengthen these spokes that are about to collapse? Now, in the myopia of the masculine, self-absorbed, zoom-in lens ego, the people over here do not want any less resources. Oh no, give us more. We're powerful, we're rich, so we want even more money because we can. It's wonderful, isn't it? But if that happens, what you get is a flat tire, literally, a flat wheel. And every single person on the circle experiences the bump. Every single person in my town drives by elderly, homeless, traumatized individuals. And for the recessed empath, for the regressed, dissociated, and betrayed feminine in their psyche, it is a punch in the chest. Because it says to every single person on the circle, you don't matter, your money does. You don't matter, your money does. If you don't win the money game, you will be shamed and punished like one of these people. We don't care about you, we care about your money. It's a punch in the gut. You couldn't punch the feminine any harder than that. You don't belong. Your money belongs. We don't bow to human beings. We bow to the money created by human beings. What you create is more valuable than you. It's a bizarre bit of mathematics. Do you mean to say that if you could pick a world with no people and piles of gold coins and paper bills, and you could have all the money in the world and no people, you'd rather have that than have a world filled with people but no gold and no paper, who were free to love and care and develop and be healthy for one another without bits of paper? It's a slap in the face. What humans have created as an idea and a symbol of value is more valuable than the human beings themselves. Every single time, every person in my town, this is in America, in Thailand there are no homeless people, but in America, where we have lots of money and lots of shame around poverty, every person gets that punch in the chest, which they, of course, tune out by numbing, by becoming more sociopathic. Well, the control part of the brain is busy, like that's the way it has to be. This is an economy. It's got to be that way, or things will change, But every person, you see, when a homeless person develops hepatitis because they're stressed, they're wet, they're cold, you've got a whole population carefully groomed to breed disease by the larger population because we hate ourselves. That's why we're going to provide an entry point to viruses. Come along, come along. Any viruses going around? We have a nice crop of entry points into the human species. Come along, come along. We've got them already. They're tired. They can't fight you. No immune system. We've told them they're worthless. So, of course, they're not going to fight a disease. So come along. And then once you get a good root in these group of people and mutate, then you can jump to the rest of the population and kill us all. It's absolutely pathological. When you ignore the weak points in your circle collapses, and with it the synergy and the mathematics that underlie that synergy collapse. And everyone has a bumpier ride. That's just the mathematics. Now, the default mode network is designed to maintain the status quo. When you shut it down, there's a void of saying, this is who I am, this is who I am. And there's an awareness of an interconnected series of synergistic relationships that are not blocked. And we experience more of reality because the centralized power isn't shutting it down. Now, the ego cannot wait to shut it all down. That was just a drug, that was just that was a crazy idea. For example, when I took MDMA, my ego knew that paying workers was a terrible idea, and it was unfair because I started my business at $7 an hour. And I worked harder than my crew, and I had my own tools, and I trained myself, and I got my own business. I did the sales. I was on time. I grew the business, and I've been doing this for 20 years, and And now these people, they want $15 an hour, and I provide the work, and I provide the tools, and I show them what to do. What about that? And this is, we've got to keep them in their place and do this. Well, when I was on MDMA, looking at a very unmasculine question, how can I bring more love into my life? Just popped into my mind. Well, obviously, I'm spending a lot of my time with my crew. What if I spent a lot, and they're always complaining about something, right? And always, it's terrible. What if we could spend a lot of time with happy people rather than complaining people? Oh, gosh, well, why don't they just be happy on their own? Well, let's see, what do they like? What would make them happy? Oh, I know. I'll bet if I gave them a $5 an hour raise for no reason at all, and just said, here's an extra $5 an hour, I'll bet that would make them happy. And then they'd feel loved and cared about. And maybe I would be around happy people instead of complaining people. It's like, oh gosh, that's a terrible idea. Look at all the money we'll lose and we'll lose all that money. How much is that? 5 times 5 a day times 10. So that's $50 more a day per person. $250 more per so $250 more per day. So in a month, oh my goodness, that's that's thousands of dollars of lost revenue. And I can't do that. It's a terrible idea, says the default mode. Well, let's give it a try. You see, it felt good. It felt good on MDMA. So hey guys, I've got news for you. All of you, $5 an hour raise. Enjoy the day. Well, what happened? First of all, they were happy. They were happy. They were grateful. They worked harder. They were more loyal. They wanted to work longer hours. I had never made so much money that year as I imagined. In other words, the default mode was completely wrong, was screwing me as well as them, as well as my finances. Everyone was being screwed by the default mode. The default mode says, why should they get an advantage that I didn't get when I was 17 and starting the business? The present mode says, let's do this because it's fun and we can. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. Oh, that's a terrible idea. That's a terrible idea. This is going on inside every individual, and it's going on inside every family. Well, looks like our child wants to play the violin. Oh, we can't have that. That's a terrible idea. Doesn't he know violin people don't make any money, and and I lived through the Depression, and blah, 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 blah. And the default mode kills off a happy, productive individual who could bring something meaningful to the cult that doesn't have the sense to appreciate it. You deal with your government. Well, what are you doing? What are you doing over here? Why are you keeping this nice person out of the country? Do you want to have miserable people in your country? Oh, that's the way we do things. And then they come in the country. Now you're stopping them from leaving the country. Make up your mind. What is this? The default mode of a chauvinistic and highly inept, biased cult is killing itself, and it's killing its own people, and it is terrified of change. Timothy Leary, the most dangerous man in America, according to the paranoid Nixon with the default masculine mode, who invented and reinvented faulty science in order to ban all psychedelics. Because what the psychedelic does is it shuts down the default mode and creates an awareness in the process of possibilities that the default mode was keeping out of focus, because the default mode's primary purpose is to maintain the status quo. Now, the default mode, at one time, the map that we have of reality, we have nature is reality, and it's far too complex for the human brain to grasp. And then we have the cult map of reality, which is always by definition wrong. It's out of date, and it lacks complexity, and it's imbalanced. And so it's better than raw chaos, terror, and trauma and collapse. It's better than freezing. But it is not as good as just about any other system of operating that an individual with a healthy sense of humility and a willingness to think can create for themselves. So the healthiest individuals are the primary enemy of the default mode. And the challenge is how to deal with a paranoid ego, be it the government, your family, your own paranoid ego, or your culture, who sees you as a threat simply because you're different. When the optimum mathematics are released in Synergy, how can you create change without traumatizing the ego in the cult and in the family, etc.? And part of it is, understanding that this framework of beliefs. Beliefs equal expectation. meaning if you believe this is a hand, then you expect it to be solid. And lo and behold, it is. So belief equals expectation. Now, if you expect something, you also imagine it. So I expect the sun to rise. Okay, what does that look like? Well, it's this light getting brighter and brighter. You imagine what you expect. Now, when you believe something, you expect it and you imagine it, you desire it. And you've probably watched a scary movie in which they're always so dumb, aren't they? You know, there's a 6-year-old little blonde girl, right? The essence of innocence, right? And of course, when there's a noise at night, the man usually says, "Stay here," like, let's separate, let's keep separate. And then, of course, she goes down, and the lights go out, so then she decides to go into the cellar, right? And you're like, you idiot. You know what's coming, all the music is coming. You believe that you believe that she's going to be chopped up into little bits or scratched or scared in some way. And you expect it. I mean, oh my goodness, they always do this with the music, expect it. You imagine it. Is it going to be, let's see, what are they going to do? Are they going to jump on her? Is someone going to rape her? What are they going to do? You imagine all the possibilities. And then you get fed up. Get it over with. Just kill her. You desire. You can't stand the suspense. The belief and the expectation, even of something terrible. Oh my God, I'm going to be caught. Oh my God, I'm going to be caught. Just get it over with. I stole the money, whatever. You desire what you believe and you expect. So belief equals expectation, imagination equals desire. Desire equals dissonance with reality. You don't desire what you have. You desire what you don't have. So belief, imagination, expectation, desire creates a dissonance between reality and the reality that you believe and expect and desire. It creates a magnetic charge between those realities. So you have dissonance equals charge, and it creates a certain kind of insanity. Because insanity is when you say, I'm a pig. And you look and you say, well, you're not a pig. Yes, I am. I've got, a flat nose and, I don't speak English. I'm a pig. And you say, no, you're not a pig. That's crazy. What do you mean you're a pig? Well, pigs don't have ears like that. Pigs don't speak English. You're not a pig. You create insanity with this dissonance. And you seek integration. You use that expectation or whatever, and you seek to integrate. So if you believe you're a bad person, you will try and become a bad person. And this is one of the main reasons why telling children they're bad can cause so much damage, particularly when it's the beautiful parts in them that are told that. But you create a certain insanity and a charge and a dissonance, and that magnetic charge has a certain range between, urgency to pain. If it's just, I really want it and it's not here, there's pain. But we want to move that charge together. And that when we do, we feel release, we feel peace. And the same is true in sexual chemistry. You create a belief that this would be a good thing. You create an imagination. Oh my gosh, it would be so nice to have sex with this woman. You have a desire to have sex with this woman. There's a dissonance and a charge. It's like I'm not having sex with them, but I want to have sex with them. And there's this charge. And there's a certain insanity. It's like, oh gosh, what are we going to do? And then you create, well, I have to figure out how to do this. And then you create a release and a peace. And it's like, I've had sex with this woman, you know, and there's this release. It's important to understand how much of our reality stems out of belief. That this whole chain of events, from distance and magnetic pull, starts with beliefs. And the cultured conscious mind is a scaled fractal version of the cult, which has a set of beliefs. Meaning, we all default to chauvinism. We all default to racism. We all default to trauma because they are deeply embedded in the beliefs of our cult. That is the default mode. To heal chauvinism, to heal bigotry, to heal the idea that you are more holy if you have money in the West, or that if you're poor in the East, whatever the belief is, to heal whatever your bigotry is, I'm big because I'm this, means consciously dissociating from the cult, which is, of course, what the cult fears at a governmental, at a family system, and at an egoic level. Don't change the system. You've got to separate from the cult. And then you've got to create a more up-to-date map of reality than the cult that is in service to the cult, or that is in service to nature, the larger body to which we are a part, of which we are a part. Because all life is this energy flowing in and out between us and our cult, between us and nature, between us and the larger world. All energy is what's flowing in and out. All life is what's flowing in and out. And what we're trying to do could be summarized in the understanding of Maslow, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. And Abraham Maslow spent time in the 20th century studying what all human beings were driven to meet. You know, these needs, whether you were African or American or, you know, Brazilian, people throughout history have sought to meet these needs. And they're a hierarchy of human needs: survival, physical survival, security in one's physical survival, love and belonging, and security in one's sense of love and belonging, self-esteem. I like the person I'm becoming. Developing unique talents, developing a connection between the unique soul of the individual and bringing that into the outside. So I know who I am and I bring this into the outside. Sharing that with the larger community, creating abundance in the process, and then transcending my self-absorption of the ego lens by paying attention to the larger body of which I'm a part and being in service to something bigger than myself. These are human needs. And as we meet one, we naturally turn our attention to the other. We have these needs. And we have those needs in relationship to our cult, our culture, to our country. We have those needs in relationship to nature and our reality. And it's worth noting that, you know, as soon as the last tree disappears and the last gasping breath is taken, we're 3 minutes away from dying. I mean, we are an interconnected point in the stream of life, in the stream of the larger ecology. And so, one of the things that psychedelics tend to do is in one of these flows and polarities. We come into the world in a feminine state, in a feminine period of life, in dependent liquidity. A child, an infant, can learn any language, can adopt any family role. We need you to be the scapegoat. Okay, I can do that. We need you to be the hero. I can do that. We need you to be really smart and good at math. I can do that. So you have this infant with this incredible versatile possibility field. It's like the stem cell of the family. It can grow into anything. You have this infant. And then you train it. You say, we want you to learn English. We want you to learn what being a boy in our cult is. Boys don't like that color. You like that color? No, you don't, you see, because you're a boy, and boys don't like that color. Oh, I see. I'm a boy. Yes, you're a boy. And boys don't cry. No, they don't. No. You're crying? Well, you're not quite a boy yet. But when you're a boy, you won't cry. And boys don't like this, and da-da-da-da-da. So, and the feminine essence of the infant becomes crystallized into the hardened masculine shape of the cult. And every essence needs a form. Water needs a cup to hold it. The individual needs a cult, needs an ego to some extent to hold the form. It's just usually a pretty crappy form. Cults are mediocre by nature. Now, what psychedelics do is they bring about liquidity. They bring about strong amplifications of change, openness, and liquidity. In essence, they induce the feminine state. They break down the rigidity of the cult and allow free-flowing, feminine and spontaneous thoughts, feelings, and beliefs to emerge. And the question is, will they take hold, or will they be attacked? And so it's a very vulnerable stage. Infancy is incredibly vulnerable. So is being on a psychedelic journey. Very vulnerable. The beliefs of your sitter. You see, when that liquidity, the more liquid one becomes, the more influenceable one becomes. And normally what happens in our culture is we become, in that very vulnerable state, helpless, hurt, betrayed, and traumatized. And as every teenager who is in a helpless state of abuse and betrayal and trauma and anger and bitterness knows, they have one drive. I am never, ever, ever going to feel this way again. No one is going to do this to me again. Once I get out of this hellhole, once I leave this fucked up family, I am never going to be in this position again. And so they leave and they build up their defenses and this and that and the other, and no one's going to influence me again. And so someone says, hey, would you get out of here? What are you after? You become a cynic. In an abuse culture, maturity is defined by cynicism. And so you've become rigid. Now, when you're rigid, in a state of cynicism, masking abuse and trauma that you don't know how to deal with in a traumatically illiterate cult, you're very unhappy. It's pretty pointless. You're very unhappy. And what a psychedelic can do is can liquefy those defenses and those masks and let tears and let grief and let joy and let healing and let flow. It can block a dam, basically, that says, I'm never going to let the water of life flow through me again because I don't trust it, because I don't trust my parents, because they're a version of the fucked up cult that raised my parents. And I don't trust myself because I couldn't defend against the abuses by my cult. So I just don't trust, which means I've got walls up, which means that sludge is building up in the cell of the psyche. It's like I've got a grate in place because I don't like what's coming through. And so there's more and more stuff gets caught in the grate. And it builds up. And the water slows down. Becomes more and more of a trickle. And pretty soon I'm feeling empty because there's no life. There's no flow coming through there. Because I know the shit that's been given to me by my cult, and I don't want to feel it. I don't want to accept it. I don't want to feel with it. I don't want to deal with it. I just want to keep it out. So I'm in my little cozy ego-constructed comfort zone where nothing's flowing through. And I don't want it. I don't like it. Keep it out. I reject so much of what's going on in reality, and I don't want to feel it. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to respond to it. But in the doing so, there is of course the same thing of a cell becoming calcified. You know, of the body being blood flow, of veins becoming varicose. It's that same type of dynamic, and in the fractal nature of reality. When you block off your feelings, when you block off your thoughts, when you block off your relationships, when you control every aspect of your own life out of fear, it's no different than the ossification going on inside the body. And in the fractal nature of the body and the interconnected systems of heart, mind, and body, what is done in relationship to reality affects our own biology. And our own biology, when we are made sick and small and terrified and we can't move without pain, we become ossified in reality. Someone says, okay, come out to dinner, let's do this. It's like, I don't want to move. I don't want to feel. I don't want to wonder what someone's thinking of me. I don't want to be judged. No. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to watch TV. And I'm not going to even change the channel too much there. It's like, I don't want to change. I just want to become comatose. I want to become rigid. I want to slow life down to the smallest possible trickle. Because it's painful to breathe. It's painful to drink. It's painful to move. It's painful to talk. It's painful to remember. I'm in pain. Now, a psychedelic can liquefy the defense, meaning all that pain is felt and let go, because it's when you put your filter up at the beginning and it's coming through, it builds up as a dam. It doesn't go anywhere. When life is a commerce of energy and out, if you don't let your own feelings in, you can't let them go. If you don't let the air in, you can't breathe it out. It's like, I don't want to breathe. The in-breath leads to the out-breath. You take it in and you let it go. When you reject who you are, when you reject your reality, when you don't let it in, you can't let it out. You don't own it. And you can't do whatever alchemy one is capable of doing. Now, within the lens of egoic consciousness, it's assumed, of course, that in our cult, I'm out for number one, right? And of course, number one is me. And so I'm doing this for me and blah, blah, blah. And who else, okay, I'm focused on me, of course you're focused on you. The idea within the egotism of chauvinism, much like the idea that the earth must be the center of the universe, according to the Catholic Church. According to the cult, we, the individual, and us, humans, are, of course, the center of everything. And so we assume everything is smaller than us. When we are, in many ways, in a fractal sense, we are the absolute smallest piece of the largest body, and we're the largest piece of a small body. It depends. In the fractal nature of reality, it just depends on what we're referencing. We reference me with the multiverse. I'm very, very tiny. If we reference me in my house, I'm very, very big. Or me in my body, I'm everything. But the idea within the chauvinism and simplicity is that all consciousness is as small as human consciousness. And we as human beings are worried about one thing. We want to feel good, and we don't want to feel bad. Us. And of course nobody else matters, but we want to feel good. And so of course no one wants to help us, because we're surrounded by sociopathic human beings who are not focused on us, they're focused on them. And to hell with us if we get hurt while they do what they need to do. So we have this idea that we're all alone in consciousness. And this is the biggest joke around. Just about every consciousness that is bigger than us, which is most of consciousness, includes us in its body, in the same way that an egocentric cell, like a cancer organism who's busy trying to be number one, right? I've got to be number one because no one cares about me, misses the fact that they're part of a larger body that does care about them. And, the folly of the cancer cell on one level is no one cares about me, as I'm going to be number one. I'm going to have to grow. Have to be all about me, right? And so the cancer grows and replicates and replicates and replicates. And is winning, right? It's so great. We're getting, putting me number one. We're running along. And finally, it consumes the whole body. It's just wonderful. Or 60%. It's like, we're almost there. And then the body dies. The cancer kills the host body. The body collapses. And the cancer's like, oh, great. But then there's no food being brought to the cancer by the host body. So the cancer can't keep eating the host body. And the cancer dies right after its host. And this is, of course, a worthwhile parable for the human ego. Oh, I'm going to cut down this forest, and then I'm going to cut this forest down even faster and make more money. Because we don't care about forests. No one's looking out for us. We have to focus on number one. So let's see if we can buy new chainsaws that are twice as powerful. Let's have robots cutting forests down. Let's see how fast we can cut forests down. We'll put the money to buy more forests, and we'll cut them down. And then, right when we're the richest deforestation company in the planet, we're all ready. It gets hard to breathe suddenly, right? Quick, before we die, let's cut the last forest down. The truth is that just about every consciousness is bigger than the human ego. And we belong in its ecology in the same way a cell belongs in our body. And that consciousness wants us to be healthy, to develop, to be alive, to be a dynamic processor of energy, to create new things, to take energy in from this thought and that thought and create something new with it in attunement with the larger ecology. The dissociated and unhealthy masculine acts unilaterally as a point with no reference to the circle. The smothering and dissociative feminine, the sociopathic feminine, kills off the individual for the good of the circle. So you have the fanaticism of the individual in America, you have the fanaticism of communism in the Soviet Union, where it's all going to be totally centralized and for the greater good, right? For the good of everyone else. The real synergy is in this partnering, this free partnering, where, going back to my workers type analogy, it's like I could probably use another dose, because I'm back in that, that carried the company in a place of vitality and fun for at least 5 years. I never had such a loyal crew, etc. And, but I'm back in my own ego, etc. But, within that framework, when the center or the government feeds and loves the circle and serves the circle, and the circle uses its power of synergy, the mathematics of synergy, to potentize the attuned individual, you have an unstoppable ecology. You have a wheel moving dynamically forward. We are surrounded by a field of optimal energy that, if we will open and surrender to that field, it is the field of the healthy cell in the body. And we don't have to. We can block it out and we can run and da-da-da. But when we open to the optimal field, a template, a possibility, a luminous possibility of this is who we can become, it is more beautiful, more dynamic than anything else. And in its highest sense, this is what surrendering to Goddess, surrendering to synergy, surrendering to mathematics is all about. When the mathematics reveal that you can be a mediocre painter or a masterful brain surgeon, or you can be a mediocre brain surgeon and a masterful painter, when we open up to the vision in which we are used to create optimal well-being with as little energy as possible, the measurement of intelligence, the efficiency with which energy is transformed with grace into human well-being, when we transcend ourselves as individuals, what is it that we become? What do we open to? And what's right in our way is that great of wounds and the determination of the violated and helpless adolescent saying, never again, I'm never going to open up to anything. No one's going to ever do this to me. Fuck it. Fuck God. Fuck the world. No one's going to make me feel this way. No one. That great that's saying, no, you're going to do this, and I know this, and then, of course, the ego gets their paranoid plan. And it's worth noting, in the ultimate extremity of all concentrated power, of all concentrated masculine energy, it is to attack its own people. Ultimately, the extremism of totalitarian centralized power becomes the enemy of the people by not relinquishing that power back to the circle, because it's too toxic. Toxicity is not about the thing, it's about the dose. So the more totalitarian the state, the more the state becomes the enemy of the people it was intended to serve. It becomes the enemy and then views the people as the enemy and tries to kill the people, the dissidents, for their own good, of course. And so you have that phenomenon. But the wound and the breathing in and the letting go of energy is the first step of opening up, not to the abuse system of the cult, but to the optimal field of the larger body of which we are a part, to the synergy of mathematics that has a more complex, beautiful rendition of our lives than the paltry, limited version of our lives that our individual ego can create, referencing the cult of which it was a part. And it is the synergy of the freely participating ego with its creativity and its uniqueness, with the larger mathematical field of synergy that is around it, that is made more possible in the luminous vision that one can grasp when the default mode is shut down. Provided, of course, that your sitter is not more terrified of change, of transformation, than your ego is. Because your sitter, who often doesn't take the substance, etc., may be absolutely desperate to maintain their own status quo, their own, hold on whatever power or certainty it is that's giving them a sense of safety. Safety from what? Protection from repressed pain, repressed trauma that they don't know how to deal with. Belief plus sensation plus paradigm equals meaning, equals reality, equals impact. Primary equals intensity. What is primary is what is most intense and visceral. What is most intense and visceral is integrated sensation, thoughts, and feelings in a cohesive pattern, which becomes the primary identity. We all act in integrity with our primary identity, and many of us have trauma as the primary identity. Because we came in, we were born, we were severely traumatized, and then we were abandoned in a state of mild to full-on PTSD. Left with nothing else to define ourselves with, we defined ourselves by our deepest pains, our deepest griefs, and our deepest desires to get out of those pains, which in turn reference the pain, reference the wound. Many of our primary identities are as wounded survivors. When we believe that the world is a scary place, and I think this is why Einstein highlighted the belief in a fearful or a safe world as being the single most important question. The belief in a fearful world with a primary identity of the wounded self leads to tenacious control, an obsession with control, and masculine energy to protect against the unknown, and with it to protect against all chaos, all change, all feminine energy, all life. Going into the unknown with a belief that the world is an unfriendly place, and with a primary identity of a wounded individual, we may be shaken out of our pain into a place of grace and descend back again 8 hours later into a matrix of beliefs in which all of this innocence and beauty that we have opened to in ourselves is under threat and under imminent threat of violation and abuse, because that's what happened when we were infants, when we were children. Openness and innocence within a belief and paradigm of trauma and abuse is terrifying. And we will try and kill off and wall up and attack the beauty within us and to push away the world around us as fast as possible so as not to mar that innocence, that beauty. And we will feel helpless every step of the way as we imagine and ultimately desire the abuse that we believe to be inevitable. And reality will come back down into the cynicism and bitterness of, oh, I tried that once, but this isn't a safe world, and it will fall away. It's dangerous. Don't even go into those good feelings. They'll just be taken away from you. This is the hell of the psychedelic journey without preparation, without integration, and without a cult to come back to that believes in the future, that believes in feminine energy, that believes and sees who you are. When you do the legwork with the beliefs and open up, as difficult as that is, when you feel and identify with the abuse survivor as a primary identity, because traumatic feelings are some of the most forced, intense feelings that you'll ever have as a human being. They don't even lose their crispness with time. They're frozen in time at full intensity. When you can work in partnership, understanding the paranoid fixation of the masculine ego, understanding the grace of geometry, the resilience that is possible when you connect everyone together with each other rather than through the central hub of government, through the central hub of a power structure. That's why the information age is such a big deal. It's why the torture of Julian Assange and Edward Snowden is such a big deal. We're dealing with the response of the totalitarian ego in its masculine expression of control, with the decentralized freedom of an individual to connect with other individuals, to survive in an interconnected framework, rather than to have one power source. You know, when Joe Biden called around the world and threatened any country that would give refuge to Edward Snowden, revoking his passport in midair as he was flying to Moscow on the way to Ecuador for political asylum. When Joe Biden used his centralized power to try and stop truth coming out, information going from person to person, without the centralized filter of the masculine power structure. Edward Snowden found refuge in another totalitarian state, not controlled by America. America is a global bully in the way it operates behind closed doors, putting on, as every chauvinist does, the front of democracy, the hand of the bully. This ripples down into the parental system, into the legal system, into the ego system that is a bully. As so many parts of the inner psyche want to blossom, want to have voice, and are patronized, lied to, shamed, humiliated by the ego in our own mind, a fractal representation of our government, just as the government is a fractal representation of our own mind. There is a field around us that is a singing field, that is an excellent field, that is a beautiful field, that embodies those confluences, those platonic values of beauty, truth, and goodness, that move us towards grace,